have here John Opdycke with the Open Primaries movement. Openprimaries.org is the name of your website, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what is the name of the movement?
Well, it's the political reform movement, the democracy movement, the open primaries movement. I mean, there's kind of movements within movements, but there's a growing movement to rewrite the political rules in this country, not just change who sits in the White House or the State House, but the rules by which we elect people and the voters have power in this country.
Yeah, that's what's on the agenda. That's what's on everyone's mind right now. We're all disenfranchised by the two-party duopoly. That's why people are in the streets. You know, it's about police brutality, and it's also about a completely inequitable system that disenfranchises everyone and doesn't really let us participate in the political process. So, hello, Faye. Welcome. Glad you could join.
Hi.
So we have John Opdycke here, and he is with openprimaries.org. I went to his YouTube channel. I watched the trailer. I was like, this is great. And I went to explain to my roommate Open Primaries. It's already in 3 states. And he's like, oh, no, yeah, Open Primaries, that's where anyone can vote in any party, right? And I was like, but then I thought, no, that is open primaries, isn't it? That's what people call open primaries. What you're actually doing is called nonpartisan primaries, despite your website being openprimaries.org. So I was right. Am I confused about that? Can you clarify for me?
No, exactly. That's why we chose the name Open Primaries. Precisely because we wanted people to be slightly off kilter.
Is that an advantage?
Yes, because it opens conversation. It opens conversation. And part of what we're looking to do is to engage people in a conversation about what do we mean by primary? Is primary a process of a party choosing its nominee, or is it the process of the people choosing who goes from the first round to the second round? We think it's both. We think that the more interesting dynamic is when you switch from party primaries to public primaries, you get a whole new set of political dynamics that are very favorable, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many other people. So we're working to enact nonpartisan primaries all over the country, and that movement is growing, and a lot of people are starting to recognize that the partisan control of primaries is a big, big problem and contributes to a lot of the gridlock and partisanship that dominates politics today.
Oh, it's a key piece. It is one of the linchpins you could remove that would really lead to everything potentially falling into place in a way that works. If we just did not have parties controlling the political process to begin with. And nonpartisan primaries really takes away some of the unfair power that parties have without doing anything to harm them as ways that a candidate can consolidate a base and get a message out there and campaign. So I am 1,000,000% on board with nonpartisan primaries. Call them open primaries, whatever you want. But I think we should have primaries that turn a total blind eye to political parties. They should not take them into account. I don't want to see the name of the candidate's party next to their name, because that just encourages, lazy, non-thinking groupthink voting. All kinds of great reasons why we should do this. But I have a lot of other very talented people here with me, and I'm sure they have a lot of questions for you. So
I'm game. Let's do it.
Open the floor to you guys, Faye, Jeremy, Ariel.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, George Washington warned us against political parties at the founding of the country. And he said that, they'll just take advantage of all the, infighting, and they'll be crafty. And he said those things. And it just amazes me that, lazy thinking. People see a D and people see an R, and then all these stereotypes go on in the back of their heads, and then they just automatically go with their party. But when it's so good to dive into a nuance, what are the nuances in these people's view, and that starts with, I think, open primaries.
Yeah. One thing that we're doing here, Jeremy is working on, is getting a PAC together to support basic income candidates on the Republican side of the aisle. And one thing that nonpartisan primaries would do would open the floodgate of traditionally Democratic support to cross-aisle progressives on the Republican side. And that's terrifying to the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this. The biggest state that moved from party primaries to public primaries is California. It's also in place in Washington state and Nebraska, but California is the biggest state. And you talk to anybody involved in California politics, and it's been a complete game changer. Because you now have, on the one hand, it's a progressive state. You tend to get Democrats elected. But you get Democrats elected who have no problem at all building relationships and coalitions with Republicans, with independents. Independents, there's 5 million in California. It's the fastest growing segment of the electorate. So you get a state house, you get politicians that are not completely beholden to party leadership. In fact, they got elected by reaching outside the politically correct boundaries of their party, creating new coalitions. And when you have a whole bunch of elected officials that are more accountable to their voters than they are their parties, all kinds of new things are possible from a legislative point of view, from a conversation point of view, from a planning point of view. And that's exactly what we're seeing in California. And that's exactly why Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy, who hate each other, both hate the open primaries. They hate it.
That's great.
They're both the establishment, yeah.
Yeah.
Just two sides of that coin. Faye.
I have a question, which is at what level of open primaries would you consider as being in Texas? Because that's where I live.
Well, Texas is not the best and it's not the worst. So in Texas, you don't have partisan registration. So when you register to vote, you're just a voter. And then on primary day, you can choose the Democratic ballot or the Republican ballot. All voters can do that. That's better than New York, where I live, where you have to register in advance and then you can only choose that party's ballot. And if you don't join a party, you don't get to participate at all.
Yeah, that's me too in New York.
Yeah, so Texas is better than New York, but here's the problem. The problem, you still have to choose a party ballot. And a lot of what's happening in the country is that more and more voters are saying, I don't want to be locked into a silo. I want to vote for actually a Democrat for my state assembly, but I want to vote for this Green candidate for state senate, and I want to vote for a Republican for governor. And then I want to go back over for Democrat for U.S. Congress, because those are the people I think are the best candidates. In the Texas system, you can't go across. You can only choose the candidates from that one party presents you. And the problem with that is it doesn't just limit choice. The problem is that a lot of people, in fact, something like 70% of the country, they live in a district in which one party dominates completely. So if you don't choose that party's ballot, then you end up in a general election in which everything's already been decided. The primary is the only election in which there's some uncertainty. But then you're forced, let's say you're a progressive and you live in an area dominated by the Republicans, you're forced to choose a Republican ballot. And you're like, well, I'm not a Republican. Why would I do that? Then you get to a general election and all the races have been decided for you and you have no voice. So Texas is better than some, but it still is a problem to have to pick a party ballot.
So I see in Texas one of these, so I go to the Democratic meetings, okay? And what I see there is they kind of huddle in their group, right? And this is my group. We huddle together in our group and we kind of talk shit about the other side, and we like say those people are the racists in our neighborhood, but those people are the 90% in our neighborhood. I'm in the minority, right? So I'm like, I can't live my life thinking that all those people are racist. I just don't see that. There must be something good about that party or they wouldn't all be there. So my feeling is, I'm wondering, and then they get very upset. They say, I'm not a real Democrat if I'm not, playing the football, their team versus our team. So when we go to the, sign up voters and stuff, and I say, let me walk over there and just get anybody. I'm going to tell Republicans they can come and vote in our primary. If they voted a Republican last year, it doesn't matter, right? This year you can vote for either one because we're in Texas. They don't like that. And I'm like, how do you grow if you don't get the other team in here? So I don't really understand how the parties are. Is there any point to even having parties at this point if we're going to go open primary?
This is not to serve democracy. It's to serve deep capture, which the parties have control. The point of having parties is to limit your options, not to give you options. They're
okay.
working as intended, and that's the problem for regular people.
But I feel like, why do we have like two places where people huddle together and talk about those other people as if they were somehow different? To me, they're all humans.
It's so stupid.
But that makes me not a real Democrat if I think everybody's just human and the same.
How long can that last? How long can that criticism have any teeth whatsoever? I mean, it's already starting to fall on deaf ears. People are sick of the Democrats and the Republicans. You know, the Democratic primary was a debacle, an embarrassment, illegal, I would say, unconstitutional, disastrous. It couldn't be worse. So if they say you're not a real Democrat, go good. You know, I'm not a real Democrat, and that's good.
I appreciate your viewpoint, Shale, but I'm wondering if John feels like is there still an actual point to having two parties if we're going to do all open?
Well, I believe parties have a legal right to exist as private organizations. I think that actually they would function better and could play a more positive and contributory role if they weren't running the election system, if they were truly, private organizations of citizens that choose to come together to advance an agenda or for whatever other reason. The parties become much more corrupt when they play this dual role of they're both the competitors and the umpires at the same time, and it really ruins things. I think that you're onto something, Faye, in that dynamic that you're describing of conservatism, not ideological conservatism, but organizational conservatism. It is so prevalent in both major parties. And I think what I feel excited about, if you kind of take a long view, if you step back a little bit and look at the American people over the last 30 years, they have been working to dismantle this two-party system, and they've been trying all kinds of things. They tried Ralph Nader. They tried Ross Perot. I was part of the Perot movement. I was part of the left wing of the Reform Party and have great stories to tell about that. They tried Barack Obama as a post-partisan president. I would argue that the election of Donald Trump, who people forget this, destroyed the Republican establishment.
Oh, yeah.
Destroyed them. That was part of an effort to dismantle Washington. Again, I'm not a Trump fan.
No, we completely agree. He was a right populist. He's not a real Republican, but he's also not a real alternative that's viable.
Exactly. But people have these limited tools, and they have imperfect tools, and they've been trying from the left, from the right, from the center, from the left and the right at the same time, the Bernie campaign, to challenge this setup in American politics, and we haven't succeeded. The two-party system, they can't write laws very well, but they know how to protect their own power. They're literally geniuses at doing that. But it's a fight that unites Americans of different football teams, to use your term, Faye, and is very threatening to the leadership and the establishment in both political parties.
That's why I love it so much.
So so if we have these parties which are considered private organizations still, and the Supreme Court has basically said, you can hide in a dark, smoky back room and basically choose anybody you want, that the whole primaries is a sham, almost. It's like, I'm wondering, if they have the right to choose, if maybe what we need to do instead is just make it better known that the primaries are, it feels like a complete waste of time to me, because if it's already controlled and somebody has decided who really should be the candidate, but this feels like, right now I feel like we're being lied to, like this is a democracy, but actually this is us participating in a private organization, which is not necessarily have to be democratic whatsoever. Since the Supreme Court says so, they can pick whoever they want.
My only rephrasing, not disagreement, but rephrasing of what you said is that I don't think things are so cut and dry. I don't think they're either this or that. I think they're this and that. I think our democracy is a democracy. I think the American people have fought their asses off for 200 years to grow it and change it. And I also think it's been corrupted and controlled by these private organizations in ways that make our voices very difficult to be heard. And people are working to change that. All of that is part of the mix.
Like we often talk about privatizing government agencies, like, oh, they want to privatize the U.S. Postal Service or something like that. But we very seldom talk about making something into a public, you know, taking that step out into the government. So what if we took the
that's
two?
Interesting.
What if we took the two private parties and stopped giving them these private powers and just say, you know, you've basically become the new. You're the basis of our democracy now, so we need to just, you know, give that back to the government to run. What
It's
about
a very
that?
reasonable case. I really like it.
There's a long history of litigating that very issue, going back, over 80 years to when in the South they used to conduct whites-only primaries, and the Democratic Party, the party of white supremacy in the South, argued that we're a private organization, and we're simply allowing our membership to choose which candidates go from the primary to the general election. And it just so happens that you have to be white in order to join our organization. And that was successfully litigated in the 1940s in Texas and a number of other states to say, actually, you are acting in the public interest and you can't do that. That there's this private organizations, when they enter the public sphere, can't just do whatever they want. I just filed a lawsuit last year in New Mexico where we didn't win and we didn't lose. We basically had a judge who said to us, please take this case somewhere else. But we were challenging the use of taxpayer funding to conduct closed party primaries, because the parties, they say, look, why should independents be able to vote in our primaries? That's like saying Elks Club members should be able to vote in the Rotary Club elections. You'd never allow that. We're private associations. Come on, let our own members choose our candidates. And there's some validity to that argument. The problem is then they turn around and say, we're private, but we want the public to fund it. They want to have their cake and eat it too. So we were trying to get in and divide those two things and say, great, if you want to have a members-only primary, go for it. But why are we involved? Why are we taxpayers on the hook for that? And the judge in the New Mexico State Supreme Court recognized they had a piece of TNT in their hand, and they found a very creative way to simply say, I will not be ruling on this case.
Great abdication of leadership.
Yes, exactly.
That's the American way, isn't it? That's what it feels like.
Well, I felt a certain perverse pride in bringing a lawsuit that was so controversial that they literally couldn't rule for or against it. I kind of like that.
Wow.
It shows you're doing something right, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But we're going to bring that case in another state. We're working on our next go around on that.
Yeah, was there a reason initially why you targeted New Mexico to present that case?
Yeah, New Mexico, like many states, but a lot of states west of the Mississippi, they have what are called anti-donation clauses in their state constitutions. And this goes back to the turn of the 19th century when there were these conflicts of interest where the railroads would bribe all the state legislators and then have them pass laws giving public money to the private railroads. And so when these territories were becoming states, they were breaking up these trusts and these monopolies. They built in clauses that said you can't spend public dollars on private enterprises unless you can show that it's in the public interest. And this has been litigated over the past 100 years of that definition of what is in the public interest.
So I'm wondering if we have this open primary. Okay, then where would people go to discuss like their party strategies and stuff? If they're saying, is everybody going to be allowed to be members of both parties now? I mean, I don't really actually understand why I can't be a member of both. Like right now, I can't go to the convention, right, for the Republicans if I go to the Democratic one, but there's nothing preventing like a very powerful corporation from donating to both, but as an individual I can only attend one. So
yeah, that's a great point. I never thought of that. What we're talking about in the public primary is that there's still parties. There's still the Democratic Party, the Green Party, the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party. Parties have a right to exist, just like the NAACP and the NRA and the Teamsters, and these are groups of people that come together to advance an agenda. They have a right to exist. But the primary is no longer a Democratic primary or a Republican primary or libertarian primary. It's a primary, public primary. And all the candidates appear on the ballot, and all the voters get the exact same ballot. And you as a voter can vote for one candidate in each race, and you can choose among all the candidates. And so what it does is it basically says parties should do what parties do, which is have meetings, have conference calls, do fundraisers, do candidate trainings, go out and march, do rallies, do fundraisers, do educational events, do all the things that political parties and citizens groups do. But on election day, which is run by the government and paid for by the taxpayers, you don't have to be a member of a private organization in order to participate. You can be a member, but you don't have to be a member. So it changes what parties are. Right now, they're this quasi-governmental, private, public, and it's not just the primaries. It's gerrymandering. It's the presidential debates. Ever notice why there's only a Democrat and Republican that show up in September in the presidential debates? It's not an accident. It's not like there aren't other people running. The boards of elections. The boards of elections are made up of Democratic commissioners and Republican commissioners. Independents and minor parties have no representation. That's from the local level all the way to the Federal Election Commission. So it's a real boondoggle. And I think it's so interesting that you said that yeah, corporations can donate to both parties, but we, the people, are locked into one. And
divide
that's a
and
real
conquer.
problem. Yeah, divide and conquer, exactly.
It's the theme of the strategy of the elites every time, a different form of divide and conquer. Or it's like one of three different ones, but that's their favorite.
Yeah, like my main reason for wanting a third party or fourth party or additional parties is to precisely to prevent one organization that has a lot of money from just buying everybody in the election. If you only have two candidates, it's easier to buy than three and easier to buy than four. So that's why I'm always, but I really do wonder what exactly would it mean to even have a private party if you don't decide among your membership who you're going to support and put your efforts towards. So that's why I'm kind of confused by the open primaries, but you're welcome to tell us a lot more about it. Yeah.
Well, I think in some ways you're absolutely right. If the parties became more truly private organizations, they should absolutely have the right to come together and say, hey, here's the candidate. Let's have a debate. Let's have an internal party caucus or meeting or convention or vote or whatever we want. Just like the Teamsters do that. They even have elections. They do all kinds of things. It just doesn't involve the government, and it doesn't involve the taxpayers. It's an internal party process that goes on.
So the Democrats and the Republicans don't pay for their primaries.
No, we do. Right. The other thing that's interesting, Faye, is that part of one interesting dynamic that's emerging that I feel very excited about is that, as I mentioned earlier, independent voters are now the largest and fastest growing segment of the electorate. And what a lot of independents are saying is we want a voice, we want alternatives, but we're not necessarily only interested in third parties. Maybe we want third movements or third forces or third alternatives. Maybe so for example, there's been some aborted efforts to create a process of choosing an alternative presidential slate that is not based in a party. There was one called Unity 08 that and then Americans Elect that was trying to create an online primary system open to all Americans where they could register, get a number, and vote online to create an alternative ticket to the Democrats and Republicans, but it wasn't a traditional party. And they won a very important lawsuit in federal court, giving them the right to participate in national politics as a force as opposed to a party. That's fascinating, because you talk to younger voters want choices and alternatives and options. They're not that keen on joining a party, any party, even an alternative party.
My personal story I've been telling everyone is in our Democratic groups, I'm the youngest person there, and I'm the same age as Andrew. So I'm like, there's 2 generations behind me that are not joining.
And you're the
it's
youngest.
very hard to. I'm the youngest.
Right.
And I'm in a rural area, so probably don't represent in the big cities. But in the rural areas where young people who are getting education, they tend to leave because we don't have a university, right? And so if you get activated into politics after you leave high school and you maybe go to college, and that's where the first time you meet, political parties and candidates trying to get your attention, you don't get activated. There's no point at which you get activated into politics in the rural areas because you don't attend a university, right?
Yeah.
And I don't see outreach to young working people who are just busy working at McDonald's.
Well, imagine, I think it's a bigger problem than just outreach. Imagine, you're a young person, you've only been alive during a time when American political parties operate like wholesale crime families. Why would you join one? No amount of outreach is going to be like, hey, we're really not just keeping you from having a meaningful choice. Come join our thing. No, we know, young people know. People much younger than me know. I'm not that young, and I know.
Did you get any outreach to you, Ariel? Oops, there you are.
What kind of outreach?
Well, at least you attended a college, right? And so is that the first time that you even heard about, joining a political party or anything?
I always had aspirations to even run for president. But the thing is that not really. I mean, all that California is known for is being Democrat and progressive and things like that. But I was always into why our schooling system never taught us about money or finance or how to grow up. So I wanted to bring up these political things into the atmosphere, but I never saw an avenue for it. And no one ever shows you how. And I just viewed politics as wearing a jersey and just cheering on some progressive idea as a Californian, but never really digging deep into things and wanting to find out why things are the way they are. So, I mean, maybe they reached out to me to say, hey, support this or support that. But I was just disappointed that they didn't reach out to me and say, what are you concerned about? It should be more of that. It should be more of hey, what are you concerned about? Except we're concerned about this, and we want to shove it down your throat and make you concerned about it too.
Okay, so there's a failure of listening first. They need to listen more and
yes.
Make events that listen to young people.
Oh, for sure, 100%. That's what I do not like about these older generations. They lecture and lecture and lecture, but they never open their ears. Not all of them, but it's just been my experience.
Maybe we should have if we go for another third party, maybe we should try to get a party of the youth, like the youth party.
100%.
Maybe.
100%.
I mean, if you look at the demographics, that's the most reasonable way to divide it if you're going to go by an identity.
Because they're not in the other parties yet, so there's your pool of people.
One of the most frustrating phrases I think I ever hear in my life is when I was your age, fill in the blank. Well, you know what? Well, some of these people, when you were my age, there was no internet, there was no mobile phone. There was no social media.
Do you still hear that one?
So,
I feel like they have ceded, they've given that one up.
I think
the olds have acquiesced on when I was your age.
Okay,
at this point.
yeah. That's it. But I remember when I was 14, 15. Now I'm 30. Okay, but it's implicit when they talk about how we millennials just don't want to work and just want to be lazy. They don't say, when I was your age specifically, but they don't understand how the internet and automation have forever changed the job market. And it's not like you can just walk in somewhere and just get some kind of work to do. They'll tell you to go online, and then your online application is going to be trapped within the internet void, and they'll never get back to you. And then you have some older people just saying, well, I did it this way and that way. It has changed, for God's sake. It's geez.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. But while we have John, I want to pivot to the actionable and talk about, because we can't affect I want to talk about what can we do to get nonpartisan primaries the law of the land in every state. Let's start. We're both New Yorkers. I'm in Orange County. I don't know where you are. But what can we do in New York? You're Manhattan? Great.
Yeah.
Stay safe. What can we do to get open nonpartisan primaries in New York? This is a hard nanny state with a real ossified, powerful machine Democrat presence. What do we do here?
And will Bloomberg fund you?
What a guy.
Well, when I was your age, I would.
Yes. You brought it home.
I mean, to be honest, right now there is very little to do in New York City and New York State. Actually, Andrew Yang brought a lawsuit to make sure that there was a presidential primary, even though the results of the primary are already determined. He sued and won the right to continue the primary on June 23rd because the delegates to the convention have not yet been selected. And that was an important victory. And I've been trying to talk with Andrew, me and my colleagues, about, hey, we need people of your caliber in New York to fight to end this closed primary system, because there's 3.5 million people in New York that are just shut out. And New York does not have initiative and referendum, so it has to go through the legislature. We have initiative and referendum in New York City, but not in New York State. And so far, like Bernie Sanders back in 2016 when he was running against Hillary, he railed against the closed primary in New York because it's why he lost to Hillary. The day after the primary, he stopped speaking about it, never talked about it again. So there's unfortunately a long history in New York and other states of politicians, especially progressives, who rant and rail against the closed primary when it hurts them, and then they just drop it and they don't care. So until we can change that, until we can get more of a critical mass and we can get a movement here, we're kind of in a pickle. We don't really have much options to do it. Now, you mentioned Bloomberg. Bloomberg, people forget this, but when he ran for mayor in 2001, and I helped him get elected, he was a Republican independent. He ran on the Republican Party line and the Independence Party line. Because the New York City Democratic Party is, what's the word I'm looking for? Corrupt. And he was a long shot. People think, oh, Mike Bloomberg, billionaire, he just bought the election. No. He was a 40-1 outsider long shot. And the Independence Party ended up being his margin of victory, and he made good on a campaign promise, which was to put open primaries on the ballot in New York City. And we got it on the ballot in 2003, and we got crushed because every Democratic Party politician, every newspaper, every union, every dog catcher, every tenant leader, everybody in New York City came out and opposed it, and it lost 35-65.
And why was that? Why did they oppose it?
Because the party was threatened. I mean, again, 85% of the cities in the country already conduct nonpartisan elections. This is not some new idea. New York, Philly, Houston are just a handful of cities, that's St. Louis, that still use the old partisan system. The Democratic Party does fine under a nonpartisan system. But the impetus to prevent structural change, to keep things the way they are, to keep these low turnout, predictable elections, all you have to do is look at Bill de Blasio's career. He's never, in his 25-year career in New York City politics, not once had a competitive general election. This is the mayor of the biggest city in America.
Wow.
And he's never once faced a competitive election for city council, public advocate, mayor. It's all decided in these low turnout Democratic primaries. Well, if you're a politician, you like that because it's easy, it's predictable. You pay your dues, you work through the party, and then you win elections in which there's no real election. So they crushed us, and Bloomberg got very discouraged, and he's since gone on he's kind of moved away from his support for political reform. He's become more of a establishment Democrat. But I'm hoping, I haven't given up on Bloomberg. I think that he's someone who could make a major positive contribution to this country if he started spending his money on fixing the system, not just saying vote for Mike Bloomberg.
Well, I think that he has tried in his own way, because didn't he establish a school for politicians to teach people how to run cities and how to participate in like the kinds of stuff that is this everyday, how do you even, run for office? How do you, like run a city? What types of data do you need to run a city? Things like that. I thought he established a school for that.
Yeah, he has.
Which can also be seen as him, once again promoting himself. If he's training all these people up, to become his political allies in a sense. If they, went to the Mike Bloomberg school of how to run a city, and then they become elected wherever they are. It's kind of interesting. But we don't have enough schools that teach that.
Yeah, and also I think one way to look at Mike Bloomberg over the last 20 years, from when he first entered politics in 2001 to now, is that he's found a way to make a difference in the world through his philanthropy, to invest in issues that he cares about, which is so important, and I think he does very good work. But he's also made his peace with the political establishment, and he has stopped trying to change the system, and he's more trying to work within the system. And I get that. I mean, look, it's his money and his decisions, and I support that. I think he could be more effective, however, as a philanthropist and as a political leader, if he had an inside-outside portfolio, if he was doing things to work within the system and simultaneously supporting efforts to radically restructure how we do politics in this country. If he was doing both those things, he would be a very significant political player in this country.
I wish that he could get your ear more often. But I wanted to also ask you a question about the primaries, which has been kind of bugging me, which is, if you have an open primary, then wouldn't the majority just go in and vote for every single one, right? And then the libertarian person may end up looking like the majority. And, the Green Party could look like the majority if everybody is in there voting for every single party. Wouldn't we get like the same candidate over and over again in all four parties, or 5 or 6, or
I don't understand the question. You're not voting. You're not voting for parties. You're voting for candidates. Right,
but wouldn't the candidates be still running as their party people once they get to the the actual election?
Yeah.
Okay, but so I was saying, for example, in my area, if we have 90% who are Republicans and 10% who are Democrats, I don't know, I'm making up this number. I don't know the actual numbers. Then wouldn't the Democrats feel like, oh, well, then the 90% are going to vote who they want, and so our primary might end up with a person who's more like the majority voice rather than the minority voice. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, there's all kinds of outcomes, and I'll say this: open primaries, nonpartisan primaries, is not a silver bullet. It is one component of a necessary transformation that involves dozens of ways we need to fix our elections, our election laws, our election culture. I mean, there's, but let me share some dynamics that have started happening in California and Nebraska in particular. So there's a lot of parts of the country and a lot of parts in California, for example, where, given the underdevelopment of alternative organizations and third parties, given where we are, that a Democrat is going to win in November, or a Republican is going to win. In Oakland, California, a Democrat is going to be elected to the state Senate, the state Assembly, the Congress, and so forth. That's decided. In certain parts of the Central Valley, a Republican is going to win. The question then becomes, which Republican or which Democrat? And part of what you see in an open primary system is that you start getting Democrats in Democratic areas that say, I think I can go up against the party hierarchy, the old guard, by reaching out to all these Republicans and independents that live in this area that get ignored. Typically, no one talks to them because they're not Democrats in a Democratic area or Republicans in a Republican area. They're ignored. Their votes don't matter. I'm going to go out and reach out to them and say, look, I'm a Democrat, but you might be a Republican, but I want your vote. And a lot of times people are like, you're the only politician who's ever talked to me, so I'll vote for you. I might even disagree with you, but I'll vote for you. because you talk to me, you include me, you want to hear my voice. It goes back to what Ariel was saying about just nobody listens to people. No one cares what they actually think. So you start getting these politicians getting elected that are, yes, they're in one party, but they don't want to limit their base to people in their own party. They want to go out and talk to other people, and they build that coalition. They go to Sacramento, and all of a sudden they're governing in a different way. That's what we see. Now, I happen to think that if you start doing that, you create an environment in which some new things can happen, including independent candidates, third-party candidates. You can start getting new coalitions running their own candidates. All kinds of things are possible. It's a very good first step.
Yeah, exactly. When Andrew Yang said that I understand why people voted for Trump because he got the problems right, that really hit a nerve with some people, because it's like Donald Trump got like there are problems in this country that Donald Trump addressed, but then he said his solutions were, nonsense and garbage. Because when Trump said that like people are suffering and people don't have enough money and like things are getting worse little by little, like people felt the squeeze of like losing jobs and lower wages and all of that stuff, and he called himself the jobs president. But then Andrew Yang came along and said, look, like, I understand why you would have went for this guy, but he didn't. It's not immigrants, it's automation. And then that's how he got so many people who were in the Trump camp to come over to his side, the Democratic side, because he said, I know why things are so bad. And it's not what Trump tells you it is. It's look at these things too. Yeah. And that worked.
So we heard from somebody who is running for like a mayor type position where it's a nonpartisan, race. Okay, especially in most like rural areas that don't have the party is not interested in helping, run candidates all across the country for every single little race. So, but she was saying that she couldn't get a list of everybody in the town in order to run for office, because you want a list of people that you're supposed to be campaigning to, right? That was really convenient for me when I wanted to go to become a national delegate. I got a list of the exact people that I need to talk to and convince them. Well, if you're in a town and you don't have a list of the inhabitants and you can't email them or write to them and do all this stuff, it's kind of weird. So she said that the only lists that are available are either the Democratic list or the Republican list. So you have to pick one and ask, join them and ask them for a list. So what do you think about that? I don't know.
No, that's the culture change that needs to be engaged. Because you're absolutely right. There's these both legal, but also just the way things are done, which is that everything from gets divided, whether you're a voter, whether you're a candidate, it gets divided into Democrat and Republican. And then people wonder why there's such vitriol and partisanship. Well, if you divide everybody, then why do you expect there to be something different?
Yeah, you've already labeled. You're asking people to self-label themselves, but some people don't want to be either of those labels.
No, I mean, again, I hit this drum over and over. The largest and fastest growing segment of voters in the United States of America are people who say, I do not want to join a political party. I want to be an independent. And yet, you talk to any national political pundit, left or right, and what they will say to you is, doesn't matter. Those independents are not really independents. What they are is closet Democrats and Republicans. They really are Democrats and Republicans. The true independents are only about 2 or 3% of the country. There is think of the cultural transformation that's going on right now in sexuality and sexual identification and body identification and the amount of respect. And it's not uncontroversial, but there is a national conversation about the right to identify yourself as who you are and how important that is for people. When it comes to independent voters, they say, I'm an independent, and it gets ignored and negated. across the board by left, right, center commentators. Oh, you can't call yourself an independent.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't choose that identity. Only
Right.
different identities. No. You have you're either Republican or Democrat. That's it. Or you're a no good person.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, you're throwing your vote away. This I hate hearing this stuff. When you have okay, so in our area we have what are called closet Democrats because it's such a minority, right? That you actually don't want to come out to even your family because you could have, consequences that you do not intend. Right?
Texas.
To just believe in one party or the other is so weird. I'm sure that's happening in other places too, where it's like, if you're the one
probably. I mean,
Republican.
there are Republicans in New York, but like my mom will be like, if she sees a Republican.
But it'd be hard to come out to your mom that I'm a Republican if everybody in your family is Democrat. So it's kind of a strange label that people have to deal with, and it's artificial. It doesn't even apply to like something that would be factual, like maybe what your identity is in terms of a male or female or how you feel about yourself.
So, John, what are some of your organization's current projects, and how can we help you guys out?
Sure. Well, we have a referendum on the ballot in November in Florida called Amendment 3. It will create the public, open, top 2 nonpartisan primary for state offices. Unfortunately, we couldn't do federal this time, but it will affect all state offices. We're working on a very interesting campaign in the city of St. Louis called Proposition D, which St. Louis is one of only a handful of cities that still use partisan elections to elect city council, treasurer, and mayor. And what's happening is you have these Democratic primaries where you'll get 3, 4, 5, 6 candidates that enter. Whoever wins the Democratic primary wins because the Republicans don't run any candidates. And you'll get someone who wins the Democratic primary with 25% of the vote, and they're now the mayor. So we're doing something to create a nonpartisan primary with something called approval voting, which is a new innovation where you don't just vote yes, you don't just vote one candidate, you approve of the different candidates, and you can approve of as many as you like. It's a new system. It's in Fargo, North Dakota. A lot of other cities are looking at it. It's a form of ranked choice voting. So we're doing that in St. Louis. That's very exciting. There are an effort in Alaska to create something called top 4 open primaries and combine it with ranked choice voting and full campaign disclosure. So people who give money have to disclose their donation. It's going to be on the ballot in November. We won a big court case last week. That's an interesting combination of reforms: ranked choice voting, open primaries, and disclosure. And it will be on the ballot in Alaska. There's a similar measure on the ballot in San Diego. We're working on a legislative campaign in Pennsylvania to simply allow independent voters to pick a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot. We want to go to the Texas system in Pennsylvania. Again, not the end of the story, but an important first step is to allow people just to be able to do that. And then there's some things incubating in Arkansas, in North Dakota, that are not quite full-blown campaigns, but people are starting to work on this as well, and also in Maine. So there's a lot of action on this. A lot of people recognize that the current primary system really is a problem.
So I think the question is, how do people join you and actually help you right now? Because you are working on a lot of things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go to openprimaries.org, sign our petition, get into our email network. You can follow us on Twitter at openprimariesUSA. We just did I would really encourage people to go to our website and watch some of the virtual discussion series that we've been doing these last 3 months. We've been hosting Zoom meetings of between 50 and 150 people around the country to talk about very, I think, important political conversations about the relationship between election reform and civil and voting rights, Black empowerment, community empowerment, in the rise of independent voters. We've looked at specific states, what's happening in Nevada, what's happening in Florida. We've reviewed some scholarly work being done, some legal work being done on these issues. They're really great conversations, and We recorded them and put them up on YouTube, and people can watch them afterwards. It's a great way to kind of get up to speed on this issue and get into the nooks and crannies of it and what it looks like around the country.
The things that you mentioned being worked on sound like a lot more than just open primaries.
Absolutely. I mean, open primaries is, in some ways, it's an excuse. It's an excuse to work on issues of what is the proper role of the political parties in our democracy? Who should be able to vote in elections? How do we make distinctions between private activities and public activities? How do we allow people to break out of their silos and create coalitions that are unusual? These are the political, I see them as the cutting edge political issues facing the country. And open primaries is kind of, it's just an excuse to have those conversations and have those dialogues.
Well, it's a pretty good opener. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about some of these issues, but I don't know how much time we have with you.
I've got about 2 minutes left. I've got about 2 minutes left, yeah.
Then we probably need to sign off. My last question was going to be that whether this type of open primary would make the elections more expensive to run because you have to campaign to more people if you're not just campaigning to your own party.
Yes.
And then why bother having a primary? Why don't we just go straight to electing them directly?
I mean, there's legitimate debate about that. There are people. Lee Drutman just wrote a book, for example, called "The Two-Party Doom Loop," and he's a critic of the two-party system. He's saying we should just get rid of the primaries altogether, and I think that I disagree with it, but that's a legitimate opinion. I think the thing about primaries that I like is that it gives the voters a chance to have a bite at the apple at the beginning of a campaign and a bite at the apple at the end of the campaign. Shape the conversation, the coalitions, the dialogue, determine who the winner is. If you get rid of the primary, the voters are coming in only at the end. They're saying, here's who we want to win. But politics, in my mind, is way too much about who wins and not enough about how we, the American people, are shaping the process, the conversation, the controversy, the debate. That's what I like about primaries. More chances for voters to shape things.
Real quick, how would you feel about partyless primaries? If we kept the primary system, had a primary and then an election, but no parties at all were involved. What do you think of that?
That's what we're doing. That's what we're fighting for.
Right. But parties still exist. But imagine, if it were further, and what if parties just didn't exist? I mean, maybe that, I don't know. That's what I was saying.
I'm not in favor of outlawing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we had a big. I shouldn't take it right
maybe
back there.
Maybe parties will turn out to just be super PACs.
Maybe. I don't know. We're in a real transitional time.
And also,
but thank you so much for coming on. I don't want to keep you longer, but you have to be on.
No, this is great.
Just the little thing, there's a Represent Us. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it. Like, they speak out against corruption within party politics and why the will of the people voting does not match what actually gets implemented because of all this undue influence of corporate players.
Yeah, we're working with them in Alaska, in San Diego, in St. Louis. We don't see eye to eye on everything, and we have different tactical approaches, but we're all part of the same movement. We're on the boards of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. We're working together to transform American politics from slightly different angles.
That's a really productive attitude.
That's the key word, nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. You've been a fantastic guest. You're a great speaker. I learned a lot, and I'm very eager to support you. Please stay in touch with us. We really do what we can to support the people who come on the show when they're making political actions. So we'll do a hashtag
get Andrew Yang.
We'll do whatever
let's
we can.
Get Andrew Yang involved in this issue because he supports open primaries. He publicly talked about it up in New Hampshire about his support for open primaries. So let's see if we can get him involved in speaking strongly on this.
It's a good chance. Send a representative.
John, send a representative of your group to the Slack, to the national Slack.
Okay, will do.
If you don't know what that is, we'll tell you about it later through Jeremy, okay?
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Hey, thank you, John.
Bye. Wow, that was a great guest. Really good pick, Jeremy. Great work.
Jeremy.
That guy. I'd never heard of him. I learned a lot. Learned about his whole organization. Great.
Do you know how to get on the Slack now, Jeremy?
It's been a long time.
They changed their name since the last time you were on.
Too casual.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just
I
yeah,
didn't even
thanks for,
see recording on.
I don't know if we're recording or not, but
Oh,
are we still? Was the
We
live stream?
sure
All right.
are.
Yeah, so,
We are.
well, thanks for tuning in. I am at SHAELRILEY on Twitter, and you can find the podcast on Spotify and Anchor, if you didn't know.
Hey,
But the original home of the podcast is the
Yeah.
Spotify, right?
and thanks for tuning in, everybody. Once again, my name is Jeremy Sammons. You can follow me on Twitter at JeremySammons1, and that is JeremySammons and the number 1.
I am at ARIELS_ARM88 on Twitter. You can also find me on youtube.com/revolutionarythinking. And you can go to Ariels on Instagram for some awesome numbers.
It's Ariel's Armada on Instagram, and is it?
No, on
I
Twitter.
think you had your thumb over the mic. It's Ariel's Armada on Twitter, and is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, on Twitter, and Ariels_Ariels on Instagram.
You get aerials twice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back tomorrow with more basic income advocacy, electoral politics, and poverty news. So stay safe. Stay safe out there. See you soon.